Hello and welcome. My name's Rowanna. I'm a psychologist from Sydney, Australia, and today I'm going to actually show you what a psychology session looks like, and specifically a first introduction when you first meet your psychologist. Now, obviously this is not real life. I don't actually have a client here with me, but if you're wondering what just meeting someone looks like and sort of the questions that a psychologist might ask, then today's video might be just a really brief introduction. I want to keep in mind that today's advice does not apply to anyone in particular. Some of the things I was just making up as I was going along, and so this is not a substitute for real therapeutic advice. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this in the future, feel free to give me a like. It really helps out my channel, as well as subscribe and join me for this journey. I post all things psychology, becoming a psychologist, and also psychological science as well. And I think without further ado, let's get started. Hi, are you June? Alrighty, come on in, nice to meet you. Thank you for filling that out, by the way. I'll grab that. Come on in. We're just at the room at the very end. Feel free to take a seat. Lovely to meet you. Thanks so much for filling this out, June. This is just our consent process, and it just gives me consent to liaise with your GP and your psychiatrist as well. Thank you for that. We might go through it a little bit later. Well, we might just start with introductions. My name is Rowanna. I'm a general psychologist and a clinical psychology registrar at this clinic, and today we'll be in this room, but sometimes we also change to the yellow room as well. I know it's been a couple of months since you called the clinic up, and so I'm just wondering, just to start, were there any burning questions that you had? Nothing in particular? Alrighty, then let's get started. In terms of today, maybe we can start with a bit of housekeeping, and then we can go on to getting to know each other a little bit more, and also for me to get an understanding of why you're here today. And I'd like to end today's session with kind of a summary, trying to get on the same page, and hopefully we have a bit of a plan going forward by the end of today. How does that sound? Awesome. So let's just start off with some housekeeping. So first things first, let's touch on confidentiality. Everything we talk about in this room stays between us two. The only thing is, I'd like to ask for your consent so that I can write some notes on my laptop after each session. How does that sound? Yeah. The notes are completely private to our clinic, and they're not linked up to the public health system as well. And the only time I'll have to break confidentiality is if you tell me about harm coming to yourself or to someone else, in which case I am a mandatory reporter. However, I'll always tell you, and I won't ever go behind your back, and it'll be something that we discuss together as well. Is that all good? Yeah. So in terms of our sessions together, I know admin will have booked in kind of a set of sessions when you first called up, and those will be every week or 2 weeks. And in terms of our time today, because it's our first session, we have a bit longer. We have an hour and a half, but typically our sessions will be about 50 minutes long. So we might just start at the beginning. What actually brought you here today, June? Okay, so it sounds like a lot of this is around work, but there are also some difficulties with your family and your partner as well. How about we kind of split it up, and let's just start with work. So tell me about how you've been feeling at work recently. That sounds really stressful. It's a lot of projects to be working on at the same time. And when you're sitting at your desk and you're actually working, what are some of the thoughts that are actually running through your head? Sometimes I like to think of thoughts as little speech bubbles. So if someone was drawing you as a comic artist, what would be some of the things that they have in those little speech bubbles above your head? Okay, so some thoughts about, I don't belong here, not good enough, my boss will see right through me. I think you're right. I think it sounds a lot like imposter syndrome. It's very common for people who first start working. And so June, we've talked a lot about work, and we've also talked about kind of your relationship with your partner and your family as well. And there's a metaphor that I really like, how feelings are like beach balls. And often it's really helpful to push our feelings down onto the water just for a little bit in the short term. For instance, if we have a work presentation like you often have, or we're at the gym or something. So it's helpful to push our feelings down for a little bit. But then lots of people get into a pattern where they are often pushing down their feelings long term. And And so imagine you were swimming and you were kicking furiously and you were just trying really, really hard and putting all your effort into pushing your feelings down. How does it feel after a while? It's exhausting. And then, are we tireless? Are we able to push our feelings down forever? No, exactly. And what happens one day is that there's some tiny little trigger, something that probably wouldn't have, impacted us that much, and that's the last straw. And suddenly all these feelings come bursting out. And we often find that the harder we're pushing things down, the bigger they come out. And so when you described, being at your recent family event and shouting at your mum, it sounds a bit like it was all those feelings coming out. And so we've talked a bit about work and your relationships, but I also wanted just to ask a few questions about your health as well. So in terms of your sleep, how many hours are you getting per night? Okay, it's not quite enough there. We might touch back on that. And exercise and wellness. So you go to the gym, that's awesome. But you've dropped out of a lot of the sporting teams you used to participate in. Yeah. And how often do you go to the gym? So a lot less than you used to as well. And how have you been feeling about those changes? Yeah. Feeling a bit down about it, feeling guilty that you're not doing as much exercise? Yeah. Often that is the case. It's a bit of a vicious cycle where feeling anxious and feeling low gets us down and we don't have the energy to do the things that we used to do. And those are the things that kind of gave us happiness and a sense of purpose as well. And then once we don't have that sense of purpose, it often means that we feel even less energized. And so there's kind of this vicious cycle of guilt and inaction. In terms of medication, are you currently taking anything? No, nothing? And how about your diet? What do you typically eat? Do you eat 3 square meals a day? Yeah, okay, always good to hear. A lot of takeout? Yeah. So we've talked a lot about what's happening for you right now. We've talked about work, we've talked about your relationships, we've talked a bit about your health as well. Now, was there anything that you feel like would be really important for me to know? Something that we might have missed or skipped over? No, nothing much? Okay. Well, in that case, maybe we'll actually take a deep dive back in history a little while. Do you want to tell me a bit more about your family? So I know you have 2 brothers and a sister as well. What was it like growing up? I think you're right. I actually wondered if maybe when you were growing up, because your sister had such prominent health issues, that you've developed a pattern of pushing your own feelings down and not sharing your concerns with other people, like your parents. And in that moment, it coming from a place of wanting the best for your sister and caring for her. But now that suppression has been really difficult and actually impacting your life in a negative way. And so thinking about, the hiding as a way that might have been a little bit helpful during that time, it came from a place of caring. But now that we've carried that pattern forward, it actually being quite unhelpful in your current life and getting in the way of you doing the things that you want to do. Thanks, June, for being so open today. You've kind of given me a really good picture of what's going on for you right now, which is really helpful for us to develop a treatment plan. So first things though, I do want to get an idea of what your goals are for our sessions together. With those goals in mind, I was wondering if I could give you a bit of a summary of what I'm thinking might be causing some of these difficulties to see if we're on the same page. And this is just a bit of a working model, it's a bit of a hypothesis of what might be interacting, and this is something that we call a formulation. During our work together, this formulation will change all the time, but it's just a way or a model of how we base our therapy. How does that sound? So, might just start from the beginning. Please jump in and just let me know if you feel like any of this is not quite on the mark as well. So, you're 23 years old and you've just started work at this new company and you were really excited about it, but you feel like you're working a lot and it's not really making much of a dent in your work pile, is that right? And you're kind of falling behind in a lot of your work. It sounds like you've been feeling really anxious at work and you've often been getting teary and overwhelmed and irritable with your workmates as well. and that even though you were really keen on socialising and being able to form new friendships, it's been really difficult because you felt really drained at the end of the day. And you've also been turning down some invitations to go out for drinks or to go out on the weekend. Yeah. In your personal life, it's been leading to you kind of dropping out of lots of things that you used to enjoy, such as going to the gym, your netball team, and you feel like you're spending a lot more time at home these days, and you feel like you are doing a lot more online shopping, you're spending a lot more time on social media, but you also get the sense that it's not helping you, but you're not really sure what else to do. You told me a bit about your history and how growing up you felt like there wasn't really a space to talk about your feelings and that your parents weren't really sure how to, and that you also felt like you needed to keep things in, and so you might have developed a habit of keeping things in, and that was really helpful for you in childhood because it kind of got things done, but now it's no longer helpful and it's kind of getting in the way of your life. Does that all sound like we're on the right track? I also quickly wanted to touch on some of this idea of this cycle that we've touched on a couple of times already. You said that often you feel really low, and that you even had kind of passive thoughts of harming yourself, and that feeling low also makes you feel really low energy. And so this is often called like the vicious cycle of depression, which is that you feel down about something, and so you have thoughts about not being good enough, kind of like what happens at work. We kind of talked about that whole list of thoughts that you have. And that actually makes you feel like you can't do anything, and so your body feels kind of lethargic. But then when you disengage from the things that you enjoy and the things that gave you worth before, that makes you feel more guilty afterwards, and you regret not going for that workout, or you regret not going out to that social. And then in turn, that kind of leads you to feel more lethargic and guilty. And so the cycle kind of continues where it gives you more thoughts and it kind of adds more evidence to these thoughts of you not being good enough or that you're an imposter. You feel worse, you feel more down, you feel more anxious, and you're also getting more irritable. And in turn, your behaviours are making you withdraw. So you're actually quitting a lot of things that you used to enjoy. And that kind of feeds back into the cycle. And so one of the first goals, I think, for our therapy together is to actually transition out of that cycle, and that'll help lift your mood. It'll reduce the amount of anxiety you're feeling at work as well. And then I'm thinking perhaps after that we might talk a bit more about relating to your family and communication, as well as being able to talk about our emotions and share them and release them occasionally. Just kind of like letting go of that beach ball now and then. How does that sound? Okay, so we've gone through a lot today, June. Thank you so much for sharing with this much detail and being so thoughtful. I'm wondering, before we wrap up, do you have any last questions? No, nothing much? Okay. Well, in that case, our next session is in next week on Tuesday. I look forward to seeing you again. And we have our home task for this week. So next week, we might actually start by reviewing that, and then we'll go from there. How does that sound? Awesome. It was really lovely meeting you today, June, and I look forward to working with you as well. And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning into today's video. I hope that gave you a bit of a brief overview of what it might be like walking into a psychology clinic, what might be some of the questions they ask. To be honest, each session looks completely different, and that's because a lot of where we kind of go, what we explore, is really dependent on the client's story, and it really is just a chance for a psychologist to get to know you better. And so the more open you can be in that first session, the more helpful the kind of treatment planning can be as well. If you're nervous about seeing a psychologist for the first time, totally understandable. I was so nervous when I went to see my psychologist for the first time, even though I was already a psychologist at that time. And so it's a really big step to be that vulnerable and to share your life with someone else. But it can be so, so helpful, and there can be so much change from it. So I really applaud you if this is kind of your first step, just learning a bit more about the process. And it really is a very brave step to go and take to seek therapy for yourself. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate if you give it a big thumbs up, and feel free to comment down any questions that you have. I read all of the comments and I try to reply to as many as possible as well. If you'd like to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe and join me on this journey where I will post more videos about being psychologists, what therapy is like, as well as psychological science stuff as well. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.